Thank you, President. I rise to welcome the federal government's proposed social housing accelerator, which should see Victoria receive an additional $500 million for social and affordable housing. In and of itself, these additional funds will not resolve the current critical shortage of public, social and affordable housing, but this is a welcome initiative. But, as we all know, it is often wise to look a gift horse in the mouth, and LCV sees two critical issues. Firstly, in housing development, the greatest challenge is getting suitable land. The Victorian government has literally hundreds of sites that can accommodate thousands of social and affordable households in the Melbourne Statistical Division. If I may paraphrase Mark Twain, they aren't making land like that anymore, so don't just sell it. It is critical that the government prioritise the use of existing land holdings for housing before it is simply sold on the open market to reduce debt. Secondly, the Commonwealth funding is apparently tied to reforming planning laws. What this reform means is far from clear, but if this is just code for mugging local councils and riding roughshod over communities, then I think there will be a hell of a fight. We need to make our planning laws and processes fit for purpose and their implementation much better. A long history of poor planning outcomes abundantly demonstrates this need. I look forward to elaborating on these themes in subsequent debates. We are in a housing crisis and we need to get this.
Mr Ettershank.
Thank you, Mr Acting President. I rise to speak in the... Much better with the right lenses. I rise to speak to the State Taxation Act's Amendment Bill 2023 on behalf of Legalise Cannabis Victoria. The COVID-19 pandemic presented the most difficult financial management circumstances that a government could face. Thousands upon thousands of Victorians lost their livelihoods and lost their health. During this time, more than ever, Victorians needed the support of their government. There was no roadmap, there was no rule book for the pandemic or for the potential economic meltdown that it could so easily induce. The government had to envisage the support that the Victorian people needed at the time and act swiftly with the worthy intention of saving lives and warding off economic disaster. And the Victorian government was not alone in pursuing this course of action. Who can forget Josh Frydenberg, suddenly an unexpected born-again Keynesian, quoting John Howard as saying that a massive government support program was too important for politics. Keynesian economics and the important role of government spending when the economy is on the brink was central to all governments, state and federal. Exactly. In Victoria, we are carrying a large debt burden. There is no disputing this reality. But to put this in perspective, at 28% of gross state product, the Victorian debt is proportionally well below the national debt at over 50% of gross domestic product. That said, if there are more effective fiscal management strategies that could have been employed, then we should have that discussion and we should learn from that experience. To those who now, with the wisdom of hindsight, wish to simply use the state budget as a cudgel to belt the government, I have limited tolerance. To put it simply, the price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. It is fair to ask the questions, how would you have dealt differently with a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic? What public health initiatives would you have not funded? What social supports would you have not created or bolstered? What price would you put on the lives that were saved, the additional health services delivered, or the families preserved? But those are all now part of history. We are where we are, and the question now arises, how do we pay for it? More importantly, how do we pay for it and at the same time seek to provide some relief for the cost of living pressures that are prevailing upon the Victorian community and nationally? In this State Taxation Act's Amendment Bill 2023, the government seeks to address these two complex problems. On the one hand, we have a series of measures designed to increase revenue, including a 10-year temporary payroll surcharge on larger employers, a temporary land tax surcharge and increase to land tax, increasing the land tax contribution of absentee property owners, removing the payroll tax exemption for the highest fee non-government schools to simply equalise their contribution to that of our public schools. And I do take on board Mr Bark's comments about the need for government to more accurately target what we mean when we talk about the highest fee non-government schools. And finally, there are measures to reduce the capacity of property developers to dodge their obligations to contribute to the provision of critical services and infrastructure in our rapidly expanding but underserviced suburban growth corridors. In short, these are all measures that target those most able to make a greater contribution. This is sensible and this is entirely appropriate. At the same time, and without getting into broader budget initiatives, in this bill we see a number of modest measures that seek to assist those most in need. These include pensioners' land transfer duties and tax concessions for families supporting a family member with a disability. Let us be clear and honest with the Victorian public. These changes will increase the state revenue base and deliver some minor redistribution of wealth. Acting President, this is both inevitable and desirable, and I would respectfully suggest that it is but a small taste of what will be required into the future. As a state and as a nation, we are going to need a lot more government revenue in the future. We have a society that is rapidly ageing as baby boomers transition through retirement and into old age. This will result in skyrocketing health, pension and social support costs over the next 20 to 30 years. How's this to be paid for? This problem has been spelled out clearly in multiple Commonwealth intergenerational reports. Are we simply going to require the proportionally smaller pool of younger and poorer workers to pay proportionally more and more tax to fund the passing of the baby boomers? That's not going to work. Over the last 25 years, we have also seen and continue to see major transfers of wealth in this country. This includes significant transfers from wages to profits and transfers from working and middle-class families to families of the wealthy. At the same time, we have also seen the aggregation of ever greater wealth amongst those, mainly of my baby boomer generation and older, who got into the property market when it was more affordable and have now seen our asset wealth increase hugely. Quite apart from being grossly inequitable, these are all changes that are simply not sustainable. Acting President, could I also draw the attention of the Chamber to a couple of other minor matters that might warrant a little consideration when we consider this bill and future revenue streams. Firstly, I know it's a bummer to bring this up, but the COVID pandemic's not actually over, and we are but one nasty mutation away from another health crisis. Now, hopefully, we will have learnt from our recent experience and things may be handled somewhat differently. But if there were to be a new and virulent outbreak, it's going to be painful and it's going to be expensive. Secondly, there is the unfolding dynamic of climate change. One of this Council's committees is currently analysing the impact of the floods of 2022, the result of multiple climate confluences, including 3 consecutive La Niñas, and we are in all likelihood about to move into an El Nino period that may well have a profound impact on our country and our environment. It is to the great credit of members of this chamber that I don't think anyone in this place disputes the fact that the frequency of natural disasters is increasing, and this in turn is being driven by climate change. As lawmakers, we need to recognise that the process of decarbonising, electrifying and transitioning our economy has great long-term economic and social benefits, but it will also require in the short to medium term significant investments from both public and private sources. As lawmakers, we also need to recognise that arising from the climate changes that we have already locked in, there will be a major cost measured in billions, if not hundreds of billions, associated with adaptation measures. Inevitably, there will need to be concrete measures introduced at both state and federal levels to raise the necessary funds to address these critical issues. So to the degree that the modest changes in this bill seek to have those with the greatest capacity to pay contribute more, I say, get used to it. There's inevitably going to be more where that came from. So in closing, Acting President, Legalise Cannabis Victoria would simply note that we paid a high price during the pandemic, but critically, we paid to keep people in their homes, we paid to keep people fed and in their jobs, and we paid to keep people alive. We recognise this bill as a necessary step in Victoria's hopefully post-COVID economic recovery. We commend the government on this suite of generally equitable tax reforms. Accordingly, Legalise Cannabis will be supporting this bill. Thank you.
Ms Umakora.